And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. As you guys could already tell by the person that's on the screen, it's one of my favorite people in this entire hobby. He's been on this channel now, God, countless times. I can't even keep track how many times he's been on. But yeah, all we're gonna do tonight is we're just gonna chat. We're gonna talk some Pokemon, talk current market, just what's going on in the world. But yeah, Dan, we don't really need any introductions. Everybody should know who you are at this point. But how's everything going, buddy? I know you just had a pretty major surgery, huh?
Yeah, I joked a little bit earlier in our Instagram DMs. We both recently got out of the hospital. Um, Yours for much better things,
Yeah.
thankfully. But yeah, you're up a child and I'm down an appendix. So uh on the mend though. We had an eventful weekend, probably doing more than my doctor would like to hear me doing, but we went to a birthday party out of town with my old college roommate. His kid is right around the same age as my son. And then the fireman's field days for the town I live in were this weekend. So we went there this evening and had a good time. Oh, I think you're lagging a little bit, your video. I don't know if that's my end or your end.
Yeah, I think it was maybe your end. It's all right. Keep going.
But
Or my
yeah,
end.
it's been a little bit frustrating to just not be able to like pick up my kids, not be able to pick up and move heavy boxes of Pokemon around that I have to do as part of my job. But overall, thankfully, Pokemon slabs are pretty light and it's a fairly easy job to do without full mobility and weightlifting ability.
Yeah. But no, man. I mean, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad that like everything worked out, but that could be scary. And I think I would be in the same boat as you where you kind of just push through it. You're just like, "Oh, I got a little pain. I'm going to push through it. We're on vacation with the kids. Like I don't want to make a big thing about it." And then you keep pushing through it until that pain eventually like overtakes you and then you get your appendix taken out.
The weird and semi-scary thing was that like the pain didn't even keep mounting, and they actually told me that in the hospital. Sometimes people come like weeks after it burst because
Oh,
the pain
wow.
eventually like goes away if you wait too long. Thankfully I didn't get to there, and if it weren't for my wife I probably wouldn't have even gone. If it weren't for my wife and kids, like if I was just a bachelor I probably would have just had a couple beverages and dulled the pain and continued on.
Yeah. No, that's good, man. But yeah, like you were mentioning earlier, we were both in the hospital. I had my kids, so that's been exciting. And I was talking to you before the live started. He likes to sleep from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Then from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. he's wide awake. It's the only time you ever see his eyes because he's a newborn baby and he just cries. And
Yeah.
like he's crying, you want to cry, your wife's crying, everybody's crying. But that's part of having a newborn, man.
And how's is your first in like a relatively reasonable sleep schedule?
Yeah, so he's great. We moved him out of the crib about a month ago into the toddler bed. So he's in there, but you got to sleep with him in his bedroom till he falls asleep. So, my wife just gave birth, so usually she'll lay next to him in the bed, so I've been doing that instead. So it's just that whole part. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, this is a Pokemon channel. I guess we could talk a little
Yeah.
bit about Pokemon.
Yeah, might as well, right?
But
Well, congrats again on all that. That's very, very exciting times.
yeah, thank you, man. But yeah, so I guess one of the bigger news that happened is Charlotte, everybody got tables out of that Collecticon group, and it was the fastest that tables have ever sold out. And it makes me start to wonder, like, I feel like Collecticon is just like a microcosm of a hobby because not everybody goes to Collecticons. Not everybody even knows what Collecticon is. But then you have what Pat Flynn did with Card Party this weekend, and like that huge event, tons of content creators and stuff. And I'm interested if like Collecticon and card parties are just kind of scratching the surface for all these events because I think one of like the driving factors right now for Pokemon is yes, the collectability, the investability, the flippability, the nostalgia, whatever, and whatever, you know, you want to throw into what Pokemon is, but a huge part of that is community. And I feel with like modern age of, you know, uh, like all these social networks and stuff, your YouTubes and your Discord groups, it's changing that dichotomy and that dynamic that is Pokemon, right? So I'm wondering if like no matter what the hobby does in the short, mid, or long term, it's always gonna, in a way, be strong just because of this new community that's been built. So I love to hear some of your thoughts, and especially you've been to more Collecticons than just the one I've been to.
Yeah, they're my favorite part of the hobby. I mean, even going back, we had an unfortunate lapse in like the world's events with the
Yeah.
pandemic and all that. But then not for everybody, but for me personally, I'm not a big international travel guy. So like I missed London 2022, this year's Japan, but it's a beautiful thing. Like it's so great. We all have this shared passion, and Discord is great. Instagram, all these different online communities, being able to talk via text, and this is great. But this is not Denver. The conversations we were able to have, Swami's backyard in Denver, and
Yeah.
it's just so much better in person when it's like a handful or a few dozen or 5 sections worth of people that you know quite closely and are able to do all this. So
But even this, Dan, think like we've had conversations like this through over Zoom or, Discord calls and stuff. But when I met you at Swami's house, I already felt like I knew you. And I had that feeling not just for you, but a lot of the people that were in Swami's backyard. Like I felt I knew a ton of those people, and a few of them are in the chats. I see Retro Mason, Nesto's in the chat, Thrifty's in the
Cheval's,
chat. Like these are all people that were in that backyard. So
yep,
and you
Colt.
and I felt I knew every single one of them. I guess it does help when they have YouTube channels and they talk a lot because you get to you feel like you know them, but
Yeah, I know more about some people in the PokeTube space than I know about like actual friend, like in real
yeah.
life friends or coworkers. It's like kind of crazy.
Yeah. Like, I have a kid, but one of your friends from high school, if you saw him, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I had a kid last week." You'd be like, "Wow, you
Yeah,
did? That's amazing. I had no clue."
yeah, and I'm not like a Facebook guy at all. I have a Facebook. I do a little bit like of sourcing through some of the Facebook groups. I have relatives, like hundreds of people, if not maybe 1,000 people, through consuming my content, through being in a Discord with me, know that I had my appendix out. Like my grandma knows, some of my closer aunts and uncles. My first cousins don't all know. They don't care. Like, not that everyone in here cares, but like you at least all know. Which is just funny. It's funny to think about.
Yeah, definitely. It is wild. Or even
Hey,
just
Jake.
Jake. Speaking of people in Swami's backyard, Jake was one of the people I got to meet for the first time, and that was fun. When I met Jake for the first time, I was very interested because Jake's way taller than I thought he was going to be in person. Jake's like a strong 5'11", or close to 6 foot. So, but what's up, Jake?
Hey guys, how's it going? I assume we're live.
We're
Yeah, we're
live.
live. But yeah, man, it's like getting the gang back together. What's up?
Not too much. I'm gonna pull up the channel so I can see the chat.
Yeah, I've not been paying attention to chat.
Yeah, now I get to change the thumbnail. I had a thumbnail prepared in case Jake hopped on. I forgot what I saved it as, but yeah, Jake, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about the Disney Arcana set, because I know when it comes to the more niche TCGs, and in a way, like Disney Arcana is not really niche at this point. It's pretty mainstream, but what's going on with that lawsuit and everything? And do you think that Disney Arcana is going to be like this long-term sustainable TCG, or do you think it's just going to be like a fly by the night pump and dump type thing? A lot of people are going to get super excited about it, and then eventually it just kind of falls off.
I don't know.
Great answer.
Yeah, like I don't have strong thoughts on it. I think yeah, the way so Disney cards in general are like really not fleshed out at all. When we look at like vintage cards and Disney cards over different eras, there's lots of cards from all over the world that have never been graded. Only a couple have been graded. It's just not something that we really have any idea like what the Pokemon, or excuse me, the like Disney card market could look like and the popularity of Disney cards could be. So we don't know if this game is really just going to be like a really great game. I know there's a lot of people who are excited for the game because it's the same people who made like the Villainous board games. There's a lot of people who are like fans of that game. They think like the game's going to be really fun. it's hard to know like how is it going to be collected like Pokemon? Is it going to be the same types of people who are in this? Then we have no idea what the print run add that we have no idea what the print runs are. We don't know what they're intending to do. We don't know how many sets, or I don't know if that info is out there anyway, but I'm not aware of like how many sets, how quickly they're going to release things, what the rarity is going to be, the different pull rates. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I was looking for it at a price that felt decent.
Yeah.
So far I haven't been able to find what felt comfortable to me to like try to flip it. But yeah, it's like I would focus if you want to bet on like Disney cards being successful, I would definitely not focus investing or speculating on Lorcana initially. I think if you can get it at good prices and flip and make money immediately, you should always do that. But yeah, that's like my thoughts.
The reason why I asked you is because I saw one of your more recent Instagram posts. I want to say maybe your most recent post. You had like all your Disney cards from 1938. And just by looking at that, like, I don't know. I mean, my knowledge of that market is very, very shallow. And if anything I do know, it's from you. But I can't even imagine the effort and time you had to put in to be able to source the cards you do have. And it looks like you have, I don't know if that's most of the set, but it looks like you have some pretty high grades for a lot of the cards you do have. So
yeah, so that was from a 1938 Pepys Castell Brothers set. It's a UK company, and they made a number of sets. Over the years, Disney gave them the rights often, like after they released a movie or something, to make a set related to that movie. So they're, some of the first appearances of a lot of Disney characters are in this set, or among sort of the first year of appearances. Particularly when we're talking about cards that are in English, there just aren't nearly as many options when you start adding a lot of the other things. So yeah, so I think they're beautiful cards. I think they're cool cards. There's a lot of great stuff out there that really hasn't been discovered, hasn't been graded too much. There have been people like trying to hunt down any sealed, but I've watched these cards go from, could buy them for $1 each to $5 each to $15 each to $25 each to, some of the more key ones, in PSA 9 or PSA 10 going for, almost 1,000 or something like that. And nobody knows about them. So it's unclear, is that sort of the hype and people sort of investing, stocking? Is it possible that they could explode a lot more if a lot more people knew about them? People can take their guesses.
yeah. No, it'll be cool to see if all the hype that Disney Lorcana brings, if they do end up putting the game out and the upper deck lawsuit doesn't hold any merit, or at least pull back the release date of those cards. I would be interested if you start to see people start to pick up Lorcana, but then they get really into Disney until they finally make their way to like that 1938 set. I'll be interested. But Dan, I don't want to leave you hanging, Dan, because we were talking about non-Pokemon. And are you still doing MetaZoo, or have you finally decided that
No,
it's not worth your time?
MetaZoo is doing really well for me. I've actually on a couple different live streams here and there, I've made the claim that MetaZoo will outlast Lorcana. Complete guess at this point, obviously, but Disney is a behemoth. The amount of money that will come from this Lorcana, how much of their bottom line will it actually amount to? I have no idea, but like I can imagine a scenario, a future world where Disney just sees the ability to print the hell out of it into all these stonkers' hands. And no matter, I mean, people don't like to hear it sometimes, but supply can kill any market. Like Pokemon printed 9.7 billion last year. Had they printed 100 billion, had they 10x that, Pokemon would be in a very rough spot right now. Like Pokemon is doing an amazing job navigating it, I believe. But yeah, there's a number of Lorcana that would be too much in the coming years that could just completely kill it. And will it happen? I have no idea. I'm not really going to interact or touch it much. I do like Disney, but I don't have access to it wholesale. I have access to MetaZoo wholesale, even actually like sub wholesale, partner pricing, direct. and then I have access to Pokemon wholesale. So I don't want to play in something inherently more speculative, buying it at or above MSRP, buying it at market price, when I can spend more than I have in cash flow on things at sub market price.
Yeah. So you just mentioned something that I haven't really brought up on my channel, but last year, 9.7 billion cards. To either one of you, did it feel like 9.7 billion cards? Because I feel like, yeah, there was a little bit more supply, but it wasn't like you can call up, Dan has distribution. It wasn't like you could call up your distribution and be like, hey, I want one case of the last 5 sets because 9 billion cards were printed. It didn't feel like what I thought 9 billion cards would feel like. What are they printing? What products are they printing? Like, I guess it's just tough. My brain's not really able to wrap around 9.7 billion and still not have booster boxes available at distribution. Like, I really, really struggle with that. So,
In Japanese is selling, like Japanese more so than English right now is just scarce out there. Like it is hard to find anything anywhere near MSRP MSRP. If and when it gets to it, it might be like a 1 week window and then it goes back to double or triple MSRP, as we've seen with some sets. But I think I had been asked a couple times to estimate how many cards were printed, and I think I said something fairly wide, like 8 to 10 billion. It feels like it's within the same vicinity. Just per, like, it's hard to tell when I'm in my second year full time and I'm growing, my allocations are growing. So it's hard to separate out, like, me personally versus what the actual market's doing. But 9.7 felt reasonable and a little bit towards the higher end of what I expected. If you had told me after we got the 9.4 or 9.1 billion number that the next was going to be 9.7, I would have said we might be in dangerous, like, revisiting the early 2000s territory from producing too much product. And if you had told me they printed 9.7 billion and the market was what it was, like, there's only one, I mean, Paldea Evolved and Scarlet and Violet are fairly low, like sub MSRP, but everything else is insane. It's crazy how, in spite of how much is being produced, like how strong and liquid Pokemon is.
but not only that, it's not just liquid for modern still. When you go back, and Jake, I know you watch the vintage market a little bit more than you watch the modern market, but have you been watching some of the recent sales of some of these vintage cards, or even, and it's funny too, because one of the group of cards that have gone up the best are the cards you were talking about, probably more than anybody when it comes to modern, was all the tag team cards. And you've talked about those cards a lot and talked about how you felt that they were undervalued. And this is going back 2 years now. Early Sword and Shield, you were talking about stuff like that. But think of how deep the buyer pool has to be to continue to, I know it's all rising tides rise all boats, right? But to rise this whole market again, it's tough to wrap my brain around. Like, we're talking WotC increases, tag team cards crazy, modern product being still scarce.
Yeah, I don't know how long this will last. If I was a betting man, if I could bet it short, I would. I don't know how many years I would put on that or be willing to hold that bet, and it would have to pay out pretty well. And it depends what we mean by that. That does not mean a dead Pokemon hobby. It just means no longer, 4x gains, 3x gains in 6 months, a year, 2 years, or whatever. And more likely, like, just flat to down. I mean, I think we'll look back on this period. Maybe it'll take a few years and it'll be sort of a story of there was way more printed than was necessary for collectors in the future. And that as they print more and more, it's going to spread out the amount of things. There's going to be more people who lose interest overall. I would bet on that, but the alternative could absolutely happen, that there's just enough people in the world that more people can continue to come in. I think it made sense to argue that, like, in 2020, with all of the people being at home in the pandemic and and you're having so much more free time, and a lot of people having a lot more money. Savings were at an all-time high in this country, the amount of money people were able to save for a variety of reasons. It makes sense why people would want to rediscover nostalgia. They would go online into communities more, right? These were the narratives that we were speculating on. Why now in 2023 are they printing now another basically huge amount again, and it's all able to be absorbed while we're seeing boxes from like the Sun and Moon era, boxes that were $400 or $500 maybe 6 months ago, a year ago now, 700, 800, and boxes that were 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000, not everything, but that's a bad bet. Like it's sort of like, why? My mind goes to, why is that happening? How is that continuing to be able to happen? Either there's more people here now, or the people who are here are spending more money than they were before. But if you look at like the online data and a lot of the data that we see, there's a lot less people in the hobby. There seems to be, at least engaging in content, doing searches for things. It's a little strange to look at it sort of from a macro level and make sense of exactly what this is. So if I were a betting man, I would say unsustainable. How long? I'm not really sure. Now, what does that mean for people out there? It doesn't mean that your thing necessarily collapses. It could just mean not growing as quickly. It could mean a slight collapse, could mean a large collapse like we saw in 2021, where we saw items fall 90%, 60%, pretty much 40% across the board. It's also amazing that like other hobbies are not doing very well right now. And yet Pokemon is like, I have Japanese cards. So I'll just be honest, like I'm selling the vast majority of my Japanese collection right now. I thought I never would. Like I'm selling all my screams. I normally don't talk about this type of stuff, but like, this whole China thing, we don't know how big that is. That could be a huge part of this. It could be, that could be the part of this that sort of wasn't predictable or was surprising, at least for us in the West, that could explain at least the Japanese market, or a lot of what's going on in the Japanese market. But yeah, when I don't really understand what's going on, and I own things that feel like I would never pay that much money for that again, it's time to sell. For me. And as a collector, and that sucks, like, because I really prefer collecting and keeping items and building up over time. But that's where I'm at right now. I don't know what you think about all that, PK. Be interested to hear your response as also a collector.
Yeah,
Dan's left the collector world now. Kidding.
So I try to do lives talking about just this topic all the time, and I talked about it as recently as my last live. Is one of the things I want to start talking about more is like being a collector, collection buys. What am I buying for my collection? And not use the word like value, just saying I'm buying this because I like it and because I don't care if it goes up. But recently, so many of my lives have been pretty much for like over the last year and a half. Like it's been a long time. We're talking a long time. I've been talking about value of cards because this market is so crazy and there's so many selling opportunities, and it feels like it doesn't matter what you buy and it kind of just goes up as long as you source raw, you grade. And yeah, I ask myself the same question every day, is like, how long can this be sustainable? Like when I look at like what James from Z&G says, like that whole never punish thing, it's like, can I really never be punished over and over and over again? And then you find yourself like pushing that line, like getting as close to that break point as you can, and then
like submitting
really,
150 ultra modern packs.
yeah, really
Testing it.
testing the lines of like what should be done. And in the back of your head, you're like, you can't go wrong. And like eventually it will go wrong. And I think I've talked about this before on other lives, is, like everybody's first graded card submission was 10, 15 cards, right? And then they got their grades back, and then the next one was 20 cards, and then the next one was 30 cards, and then 50 cards, and then 100 cards, and then then you get to a point where you're like Dan and you're trying to do like 100 cards a week to PSA, and that's, 5,200 cards a year you're getting back. And then you get to like all these points and you go, what happens if like you're over leveraged on every one of those, So one of your submissions is 1,000 cards and you get hit with $1,000 worth of graded fees, or 1,000 cards worth of graded fees, $15,000. And then you're into all those cards for X amount of dollars. And it's just like, holy crap, like that 1,000 cards could equate into $15,000 worth of like your capital. And it's just like, but you keep pushing that line, right? And you keep testing the waters. But kind of going back to what you're saying, talking about the Chinese market too, is that is a new market. I mean, you're talking a potential billion people. Obviously, not everyone's going to collect Pokemon, but even if it's a fraction of a billion people, that could be bigger than the entire English market in given enough time. And I'm looking at the Japanese product and some of the stuff I'm buying, and the gains are crazy right now. You look at those Lily collection boxes from the Chinese Lily collection boxes, they went from 100 to 200. I looked at most recent sales, $599. That's a 6x in a product in like 6 months. That
Beautiful
PSA
thing.
10 Lily, that Chinese Lily card in a PSA 10, most recent sales, $1,400. Like, what's going on? Like, that is Team Rocket briefcase type returns in a short amount of time, Obviously, we're not at the end of that, but does that Lily collection box become the Team Rocket briefcase in 7-8 years? Because it's already at 700. It's you think all this stuff isn't repeatable. Like Team Rocket briefcase, not a repeatable thing. But here we are. In 6 months, we got a 6x return on a Lily collection box from Chinese product. And I look at all this stuff over and over and over again, and I'm just going, it gets me to the point where I'm far out of my comfort zone at this point with like a lot of stuff. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, Dan, on some of that. I know I was all over the place and maybe didn't quite answer Jake's question, but
Yeah, I was primarily, it's funny, actually, before we went live, I recorded the video for tomorrow of my personal collection. And as of today, it is sub 20 slabs. I won't spoil for tomorrow if anyone wants to check out my video, but it's cards that I value more than the market. There are very few cards that I value more than the market. I have thousands of cards in inventory. I have a very large inventory. There's just very, very little I value more than the inventory, more than the market. But it's primarily like something I have a tie to for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, like 2014 to 2019, I was fully collector boy Dan, and I had a tailwind the whole time. Prices slowly, steadily, in my mind, reasonably went up throughout that time period. Nothing ever caused me to decide to like wake up and say, this is insane, I have X amount, because it was a slow burn. It was like a slow, steady increase. 2020 happened, and seemingly overnight, 2020 was a wild year with a new house and a new child and the pandemic and all that. I seemingly woke up overnight and my collection had 10x, 20x. These cards that were like getting borderline to where it's like, wow, I actually almost sold them to Jake. We've talked about that multiple times. I almost sold them to Jake for like 55K. And that was a lot of money, but it was just built slowly over several years. When those became 500K, it's like, man, I like these cards, but not that much. Have them. You guys can have them. And that's where I'm just at with almost everything at this point. How many more times? Obviously that 10x, and then a lot of it fell 30% to 80%, depending on what you're looking at. But then from 2020, some stuff is up 10 times. Some stuff is up 10 times since January 1st of this year. I think at any point throughout the 25-year history of Pokemon, 27-year, whatever we're at now, every given year, there's probably been a card that's 10x and a card that's fallen 90%. And that'll probably always be true. It's just crazy how large of a chunk it was in 2020, primarily WotC, how large of a chunk it is today, primarily Japanese, and then some like random, more modern English too. But what I've just eternally done, and now it's my business, so I have to, I've taken it and I've put it into things that are more rational and more solid to me, just as an individual, like what I value more. I value stability and security for my family a lot these days. If there were things that were cheap enough in Pokemon, maybe I would invest, speculate, and play more in Pokemon. I'm finding myself just pulling things out and putting them into tax advantage accounts, into the old boring S&P 500, because that seems to have more value and utility, and just it makes more sense to me.
Do you find your risk tolerance right now just really, really going crazy? Because I know you talk a lot of this stuff being inventory and stuff, but I know you've made some really good, like, graded plays, some crossover plays and stuff, but then you've had your failure plays, and a lot of those failure plays you had, I know you were talking about them as you just wanted to do a test, right? Like, I'm going to test this. And anytime you get to that point where you're like, I'm just going to test it to see, you're seeing how much the market could bend or break. So do you feel your risk tolerance has really gotten a lot crazier? Because I feel like Dan from 2016 would never be using the words, I'm going to test this. I'm going to test this.
Oh yeah, the amount, just the numbers are bigger now. Like the amount that I mean, I bought 1,000 Nagaba packs, of which 950 were canceled or whatever. And then once they all got canceled, and once it seemed like, okay, I can buy them and actually get them this time, I bought another 1,000. And I don't think Nagabas will be the next Scream. I don't think they will be the next any given Japanese promo that's gone insane. But when my downside is known, obviously my downside is $10,000-$15,000 because that's what I'm putting into it. But that is so low relative to what the upside could theoretically be, just given what we've seen. And time and time again, it's like these things can't just 2x again. These things can't. I sold on consignment for a consigner. I sold an entire Scream set for like $8,000 or $9,000. Mimikyu, Pikachu, the three lower ones, Rowlet, Eevee, Psyduck. The most recent comps, I think that's a $18,000 or $20,000 set now. It is literally, that was a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. And same thing goes. I had one consigner sent 2 Tag All-Stars Lilies. 6 weeks ago, I want to say I sold one for $600. And it was on me. It was my bad. A lot of times a consigner will send duplicates and they'll want me to put one up, and then when it sells, to re-up it just the next week. I forgot to re-up it the next week. I re-upped it 6 weeks later. I sold it for $2,000 last week. The most recent comp was $3,000 now. So it's like I accidentally made my consigner an extra $1,400. And well, in some ways I lost them $1,000, right? Because I didn't hold them out another week.
Yeah.
Feeling 2020-esque. But the thing is, like, PSA is open still. And these cards that it's happening with, a lot of these PSA 10 pops are like 1,000 plus already. So a lot of them are out there, and I've not looked too in depth at how many are popping up on the market newly, how many of the ones that are being traded 6 weeks ago. Like the person that I sold that to for 600, has that one already been resold for 2,000 to 3,000? I could quickly go online and I could look. I haven't looked at that though. I'm not sure.
What about you, Jake? Have you been pulling back a little bit from your overall buy? And I know you had talked about it in the past that you kind of pulled back a little bit in early 2020 or late 2020, early 2021. But are you still kind of just doing what you always have done? Because I think what you exactly said was you kind of moved some of your money into other TCGs. Have you found yourself going back to Pokemon or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, so for the last year and a half, I bought thousands of cards from Sun and Moon era. So I'm selling all of those. As I've said my entire time, like on YouTube, like and it's very similar to Den. It's like I will do a little bit of speculation on like, okay, that was sort of my like Pokemon continues to stomp boom play. It was like, these are the things that I think are the best value in the entire hobby. They're extremely cheap. The downside feels extremely low. I'm slowly buying them over time, buying lots at a time, getting them for really cheap amounts, particularly the Japanese side, which is also super easy to grade. And so that was my hedge sort of against what other things I was doing, which I was selling all of my cards that had gone up a humongous amount. I was selling. And And that's, and putting it into that stuff and then putting it into other hobbies. Now, the other hobbies are also doing very well. It's very different because it's not mass produced modern stuff. Like Pokemon scares me much more and I think has way more downside than this other stuff that I'm doing. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I just don't really believe. Yes, I'm around a lot of flippers and resellers who definitely don't value any of this. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of become blinded by that a little bit. But, even when I try to get outside of that sort of area and I talk to like collectors, like they're constantly complaining about their prices and saying like, I would never pay that. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. Who's buying this? Like, those constant conversations. And this whole China thing is like, who are these people? Where's all this money coming from? Why are they putting it, collectibles in China is a very interesting thing. There's been a very interesting history in collectibles in China and collectible boom periods and busts. There are articles about it. You can read about it. China is very interesting in terms of where people like to put their money because of the government there. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. You should read about it. I have no connections. I talked to one like Chinese whale that someone that I was connected through actually because I bought a lot of like Star Wars from them. They're also jumping into other things too, and they're buyers and other stuff also. So, and they're big Disney fans too, and they're clearly going after that stuff as well. Anyway, I always just go back on my fundamental principles. What do I think this should be worth? Do I think this is crazy? Do these prices make sense to me? And then if they don't, I try to have some sort of thesis of, well, okay, because obviously I can just be wrong about my preferences. I don't believe in my preferences that other people or massive amounts of other people are going to have my preferences, right? So if I look at these modern, promos that are now selling, like the screen promos I'm selling for thousands of dollars, I try to think about, okay, what's the thought process? Why are people buying those at these prices? Why are they willing to buy it, $1,000 more than the week before? What's going on here? And it's a bubble. Like the bubble in my
price
mind
goes up because price goes up.
Right.
Yeah.
In my mind, it just whenever things double in that amount of time and people are still willing to buy it and pour more and more money into it. Like, guys, most of you were here in 2020. There's tons of people who came to me, Jake, thank you so much for talking about these fundamentals, but again, it could double again, it could triple again, it could quadruple again before it then goes down 40-60%. So if you bought it now, you might be sitting pretty in 2 years from now. At the same time, how many times can this happen before? Where are these new buyers going to come from? Like, you can start to
many
do the math.
more.
You can start to do the math, right? It becomes like, well, vintage doing that, there was so much less product that the market cap, you can sit down to the market cap of like a lot of the vintage stuff. I mean, we're only talking maybe 500 million to $1 billion on a lot of this stuff, right? Like, that's the market cap of like a couple of modern sets now,
like Tag All Stars.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like it's sort of, and it's extremely backwards in what's happening in sports right now, where the vintage stuff is the only stuff doing decent, and the modern stuff is like, outside of certain one-on-ones and certain like key players, like, have really collapsed. So and everyone's talking about how there's like, is there a bubble in vintage? It's just be careful. Like, you try to use common sense, ignore the people who come out and say, I know what's going to happen, or price go up means good, price go down means bad. Try to come up with theories about what you think is going on about the macro, and try to, like I'm totally comfortable now selling my screams into this with it then doubling or tripling. I was talking to some guys in Squeak's Discord the other day, and I was like, I have no idea how much money I've lost when we think about what I could have sold every item at the peak or something like that.
Yeah.
That is not what I focus on. I focus on buying and then selling at a higher amount, and always making money on every item. I'm not so obsessed with like, I'm going to buy this one item and I'm going to time that top and nail it. It's like, it's silly. Like,
Yeah.
buy items that seem undervalued, that have good fundamentals, and then hopefully you're right or somewhat right, or the market agrees with you. Again, if all of those sun and moon cards that I bought didn't go up, I wouldn't have been that surprised. I bought that as a hedge against my own sort of bearishness in other areas. And now it's like paying off like gangbusters. It's not because I predicted or thought that would necessarily happen. I just looked at the market, thought that stuff was probably the most undervalued stuff that existed, and wanted to hedge a little bit on some of my other thoughts, and saw a good price point to do that at. Like, that's how I navigate these things. I completely have missed waifus. Like, I got lucky and I had a few because I bought because I like got them in collection buys, and I had a few big Japanese ones, and I had a few, but like as a speculator, I totally missed that because I don't understand why people like them, because I don't get it as a collector. I don't understand the value at all. So I never saw those, except maybe in the very, very beginning, like, when they were literally like, we're talking $5-10. I never saw why those would be undervalued, for me personally. But clearly lots of people really like them. And there's a lot of speculation and stonking and money probably being protected from other things going into these things. And, who knows? But that's my take. And also why, like, any individual's taste can be very overrated. You gotta develop some competency in an area, figure out where you have some ability to sort of predict things, maybe, and some ability to predict demand, maybe, and then really be rooted in like the supply and demand fundamentals and sort of your ideas of what's going to happen. Don't follow the prices. If you follow the prices, you're going to lose way more than you make over time. Like, I would guarantee you that, to be honest. Like, that's a well-studied phenomenon that human beings are very bad. We sell when things are low, and we buy when things are high, when we follow our emotions and the prices.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to say on China quick, just because it's kind of always like China, that's why, and it makes sense because of China. I just did some quick Googling. They have a population of 1.4 billion, which is massive. It's 4 times what we have in the US, 330 million, a little more than 4 times. Household wealth, though, US is at $146 trillion and China's at 85.1 trillion. So we're like nearly double them in household wealth. So when people say China, it's a lot of people, 3 times more than we have, with only 2/3 of the wealth or so. Like, does it actually all make sense just because China? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I just wanted to throw those numbers out there.
Well, all makes sense because of China. I have no idea. I think it's more of a thinking of like what has shifted or changed. Why now? What's going on? Where are these buyers from? I sold most of my high-end items to China directly. I know most people that I know sold most of their high ends initially to China. And then all of a sudden, the West started caring about those cards, wanting them, so again, it's how these things, price goes up, then lots of people see it, and now they're finally suddenly interested, and then all of a sudden Dan and I are hunting for all of the raws everywhere to grade to try to make profit, and then that further gets rid of those cards, then we're able to sell those, and somehow every week it goes higher and higher. I don't love the idea that they're just like way more Pokemon fans getting into it now than there were in 2020, particularly when all the YouTube channels are like way down, and when like it seems strange. But again, it can be different because YouTube is very like algorithm driven, and at that point, like all these Twitch, Pokemon was sort of like having its moment, and there could be a lot more Pokemon collectors, but not necessarily people interested in the content, So again, I have no idea, right? None of us 3 have any idea. Like, are there more people? Are there less people now? It's just sort of surprising, given you'd think, yeah, like where would these new waves come in, other than that there were so many people waiting who couldn't get product. Now they can get product. They're coming back. I don't know, whatever. You go a million areas, but
Mason Berry said Pokemon is betting on China carrying the market. It's no accident or no accident, the legendary from Gen 9 are all Chinese inspired the same time they release new product to that country. That's I think Mason might have just hit the nail on the head with one of like a more obvious things though, but it's true. So, but I'll give you like a small example of like the Chinese market is one of the buyers I was buying cards from. He had a ton of each card listed, and it wasn't like a super high feedback account. It was an older account, but not like a ton of high feedback. So I bought a bunch of cards from him, and I just wasn't sure if they were one, gonna be real, or number two, if he was gonna even like mail them in a package to me. I wasn't sure. By the time they got to me, just to test to see if this guy was legit or not, when I went back to like buy out most of his inventory, prices had already doubled and tripled on some of these cards. And I'm like, this was just in the matter of waiting for it to get delivered to me in the mail. This is a very weird market to have. We're back to 2020 days when products in the mail and it triples by the time it gets to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
we know how it ended.
But just real quick, like to think about when all the scariness happened. Think of how many products did have these exponential price increases in 2020. And then when they retrace, they still haven't gone back to those prices yet. You guys talked about them all the time. Your first ever live with Dan, I want to say Dan was on there talking about like EVP or
Eevees,
EV
yeah.
Pikachu or EV and Pikachu from Jungle. And you look at what base set boxes were selling for in the height at $30,000. Like this stuff all retraced and has never made it back. My most recent live, I talked about the first edition Lugia and 10 sold for $120,000. Like, while so much stuff does go up, so much stuff went down and never recovered. So where are we today? Are we and like navigating those cards because it's tough. It gets tougher every day.
It's just the new normal, I think. I think every 3 years we can just expect everything to 10 to 50x in a matter of 6 months, and price goes up, right? They print more dollars every day and they stop printing all these things.
Yeah, I think that
They are printing
just
more
not.
dollars than Pokemon cards, though, Dan. The dollars are getting printed faster than
That's what I'm saying. I mean, 9.7 billion, that's only like 1.5 per person. I have hundreds of thousands myself. I mean, come on.
Sorry, Jake. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's I don't think we can, I don't know if I know this is your stream. I don't want to like force a change of topic, but it's sort of like there's nowhere to really go. Like in my, like it's my opinions are clear, I think, on this sort of thing and sort of how I kind of navigate this. And I try to be very clear on like what I can know and what I can't know. And then of course people ask us and ask each other, and we have all sorts of conversation speculating. A lot of what we said in this conversation is like speculating, like in terms of like actionable. At the end of the day, it's tons of guesswork. Like I feel like I'm guessing a lot right now, which just equates to like risk and bad investment. And to Dan's sort of like point before, like the more you feel like you're guessing, the more you're going to want some sort of competitive advantage in the marketplace. And so like one big competitive advantage is like getting booster boxes under market immediately, or buying cards and then knowing you can put them in slabs and triple your money immediately, or double or even, make some small margin immediately, or just buy good auctions under market. Like the more competitive advantages you can get, like the better, I think. I'm feeling that kind of more and more. Obviously, I've always tried to do that, like while I've been doing this for the past whatever it's been. But when you get into periods like this, it becomes, I think more and more important to be very more cautious with your buying. And hopefully you accumulated like the stuff before. If you haven't, a lot of people are just sort of like constantly buying and selling in margin. This is sort of irrelevant. You just you keep doing that. But anyway, Dan, you were gonna say something.
I was just going to say one thing that I've seen happening more and more lately in different Discords I'm in. There's been times where I'm on a stream and I'm talking about like, oh, I just went through a box that was in storage from years ago and I found a EX whatever booster pack that's like hundreds of dollars today. I think some amount of people like didn't believe it or just thought it was insane. And more though, I'm seeing people like, oh, hey, I opened a Dream League box just for fun a few years ago. And here's this card that's $500 in PSA 10 now, apparently, and $80 raw. It's like, should I grade it with PSA? That's the thing though. Grading with PSA is an option right now. You can do it for 40 and you can get it back within, I haven't sent it 40 in a long time. I'm either sending like a fair bit higher or 15, almost everything. But yeah, I think more and more people these days are figuring out how you can have just $500 bills kicking around when some of these Japanese cards and anything, I mean, it can be a half art hollow. If it's got Lily in the background and Cosmog in the foreground, it's $100 card now, raw or PSA. I don't know exactly what they all are, but I've got some Japanese boxes I've got to go through myself because boxes that were once a $50, $100 monster box, there's dozens of cards in them that are $50 or $100 each. It's insanity.
Well, what Jake said, the change topic a little bit. I don't know how much of a topic change it is, but I did see a few people mention in the chat. I think BB mentioned it, just talking about like the 151 set. And I saw some of the artworks that came out. It's Venus. They released like the Venusaur artwork, the Charizard line, the Blastoise line. I'm a fan of the Blastoise artwork. I really enjoyed them. And Dan always talks about it. He says, don't underestimate artist's ability to art,
Artists
which is
will
one of
art,
the
yeah.
better lines you've ever came up with. But I look at a set like 151 and I say, man, if 151 can't do good, then we're in trouble because it looks like it has the makings of being a great set. But it seems like every set recently Pokemon has been putting out. And then we're going to come off the tails of like Obsidian Flame, which is a big Charizard set again. It's got like just a bunch of heavy hitters there. Then all these big threes with the Mew.
That's one of the things that I think Jake will probably go on something about here. There is like at some point there becomes like a breaking point. I think maybe not. Again, maybe new normal. Maybe we just print money all day long into eternity.
Don't say those things, Dan. Don't let people.
When every set is the best set of all time, when artists continue to art, when they just insert Charizard after set after set after set. That's the thing with these Green's Exploration, with Lily's Full Force, with all these are beautiful cards, but there will be more beautiful cards every year, every couple months. And it's like the amount of money, if you just try to figure out how much money does it take to pump in for every new 10 billion cards every year, and how much money does it take to sustain all the current prices. Talking about it earlier, some of the early WotC sets and this and that, some of the vintage Japanese even, and some of that's ticking up too. But the amount of money at some point, it just becomes like too much to sustain it all, and it fails to sustain it all. And I will say it now, I can say it at any point in time. There are cards that from today, from June 11th, 2023, there are cards that will be 10x their price on June 11th, 2024, and there are cards that will be 10% their price on June 11th, 2024. I have ideas which ones are more likely to be one end of the spectrum compared to other, but like as far as picking them out individually, I mean, no one can do that. You just gotta know what your goals are for one, and then you gotta place your bets that you think will advance you towards those goals. Those are all you can do in any market. But yeah, when people just say like these are the most beautiful cards, that, there's gonna be a lot more high quantity, high quality, beautiful cards into perpetuity.
Yeah, and I guess I just think that like people, like I've listened a lot to people's predictions and they're all very random in my view, and sometimes people are right, sometimes people are wrong. Like there's lots of strong predictions I'm hearing all the time about this is the set, this is the greatest set, this is a bad set, this, and then 6 months later, it's like they were geniuses or they were idiots or they were in between. It's like it's all sort of it's all supply and demand. So we don't know how much they're printing. Like the set could be incredible, I mean, Hidden Fates ETBs have been $150 now for 3 years, while we have
long time.
lots of other product, like, and that was the best set by far in terms of popularity. And every YouTube channel at that point, if you go back on if all these modern channels now that talk about these things and people think they're experts, they all would have been like, that'll be the best set, that'll do the best over the next 5 years. Nobody would have said any of those like team up, like, these sets that ended up doing the best. The point is just that it's yes, okay, and it doesn't mean that the speculation is stupid or is worth nothing. Okay, I went a little hard there because I just get frustrated because I think people overthink their ability to know what's going to happen, or because we so don't know the supply side and we so don't know the plans of a Pokemon, that even if you can fairly accurately predict this is going to be a high demand set, this set's going to have 20, 30, 40, 50% of the demand of this other set. Well, what if it has 10 times the print run randomly, or which is the booster box going to have a high print run? Is the ETV going to have a high print run? Is this a specialty product? Right? The UPC Charizard is like the only one to talk about right now that talks about this sort of like on the downside at the moment. And Hidden Fates ETBs, like two of the 5 most hyped products in the last 3 years or whatever. But like, there's going to be a lot more examples during down periods, and the up examples are going to be sort of what's the phrase? The exception, not the rule. Whereas right now, sort of that, like, people who are sort of like just buy everything are winning and doing great. Particularly if they're also buying on the Japanese side, because everything is either flat or way up, right? And I think people who continue that sort of mindset and continue to do that, particularly if they're getting it like below market, like, that could be a play where you're sort of like, Pokemon's just roaring. I'm going to continue to bet that it's going to continue to roar. And as long as I get it at really cheap values, I'm going to ride this out and I'm going to, keep going. Right. That's very different than people buying these things at 400, 500, 200, 1,000, 1,500, already into a large life cycle. And I'm going a bit ranty there, but yeah, it's just like, the best advice I think is just, focus for me, I guess. And my strategy is like, I just focus really hard on making good buys at things that I really believe in, that I think the fundamentals are really good and that it feels undervalued, under market. That will not work necessarily for larger businesses though, and for people who need more product constantly. And there are lots of ways to really de-risk, like what Nick does by like opening a bunch of the product immediately upon release and selling the singles. Like, there's lots of, but are you that if you're an investor putting it in your closet? Like, anyway, it's what sort of role in this market, and at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game. Like, for all of the money, and I think about this all the time, for all of the money that I'm making, in this market right now, that Dan's making, that all these other people are making, like, it's coming from somewhere. And that the Pokemon companies continue to make, and eBay and all these auctions, like, it's coming from somewhere. It's investors, it's collectors, and will there be new investors and new collectors and people with more money eventually down the line to buy your product? Maybe, depending on the product, depending on the thing. But anyway.
No, I just saw in the chat, Nate G says, how's a high-end vintage trophy market doing? Vintage doing good. Modern high-end trophy market doing phenomenal. I'd say the trophy market right now is doing some crazy stuff. And everything is subjective to prices, but I think just the other day, Opossum Bud put out a video talking about those Japanese modern trophy cards going for crazy prices. I mean, you talk about the high-end vintage trophy markets, like, in the last 2 years, we've seen the highest sale in the history of this hobby for a vintage card, with that Illustrator Pikachu and a PSA 10 selling for, millions of dollars. that is a price point within the last 2 years. That is kind of the top of the mountain for vintage. But then more recently, if you've been watching some of like the Pokemon news, is somebody finally graded that Pikachu Snap card. So I guess Snap card's still considered a trophy card, right? And that's more or less breaking the hobby right now. I've seen everybody and their mother talking about that card, So high-end trophy cards right now, and that's as vintage as you get when you talk about Japanese Snap cards. So yeah, market's going crazy. And then we've seen some of those high-end vintage trophy cards trickle out. Rare Candy acquire that big collection, like Tropical Mega Battle, the Super Secret Battle Mewtwo's, again, a couple of trophy or Snap cards, but all those cards have crazy demand to them. So remove yourself out of this hype period and go back in time. Prices for vintage trophy cards are not even like, they're galaxies away from where those prices were. I had MK Poke CC on. He did buy a Super Secret Battle number 3 Mewtwo for $1,800 in 2009. What's that card selling at today in a PSA 10? And he graded a PSA 10. That card is over 6 figures. So that's a card today that's 6 figures. In 2009, it was $1,800. So I would say the high-end trophy card market's doing some crazy things right now.
Yeah, there's seemingly a lot of money everywhere, which doesn't really correlate with my like day-to-day real life. Maybe it's just where I live. I don't know.
Yeah. And you've seen it trickle all the way through. And what are those worlds packets called? They give all the contestants like the top, what are they called, Dan? You bought a bunch of them.
Champions Festivals are the new ones.
Yeah, the Champion Festival packets, and there's a bunch of different cards in there. When you were picking yours up at 2019 Worlds, you were paying what, $100 per pack, right? And think of what those were right after release. Like right after, you were lucky if you picked them up for 500, between 5 to 600. And now what are those packets selling for right now? And this is not a long time. 2021 Worlds was not a long time ago. It was, or 2022 Worlds, I should say,
Yeah, those things are going. I did a trade for one at Dallas, valued a little over $1,000.
So, I mean, that's something that right when they were handed out, we're selling between 500 and they've already made it to 1,000. Like, where were all those people? Why didn't they buy them when they were readily available? Because those packets are most available right after Worlds, because that's when most people are selling, It's where were they a year ago? Why spend $1,000 today? That's not, you're going to tell me these are new people hopping into the hobby, picking up those? Like, probably not. I don't know.
Buy after the 5x before the next 5x, or
That's what the majority of people do. It's just the way that market's fun.
When something doesn't fundamentally change, obviously if there's a reprint, something has fundamentally changed on the supply side. But when something is inherently the same item and the price goes up, you should desire that item less. But that is not what people do. And when the price of something goes down and all the fundamentals are the same, you should desire it more. But again, people buy high, people sell low, emotions, FOMO. FOMO exists on the down and the upside too. Because I mean, I've had conversations with some people on, hey, I bought this card, and I talked earlier about being in this position myself. I assembled a collection of complete WotC PSA 9s. My cost basis was in the low 5 figures, and at the time I almost sold it to Jake, it was 50,000-60,000. And at the time that I started piecing it out and chunking large parts of it, it was $500,000, something like that. But I've talked to people that bought Gengar Mimikyu, they bought Lily, they bought whatever it may be, when they valued it more than the market. Hey, I collector boyed this card for $100, and I watched it go to 200 and it wasn't enough, and 500. Well, now it's like $3,000 or whatever it may be, whatever card we're talking about. What should I do? And the very unsatisfactory answer is like it could 5x again. So go to like pretend you go to bed tonight and pretend you wake up. Just put yourself through this thought experiment. Let's say it's Scream. Let's say it's Scream Eevee, because I sold over 100 PSA 10 Scream Eevees. I sold them everywhere from $40 to $500 or so, which $500 was a few weeks ago. I saw that they're going tonight for like $1,400.
What is going on?
So say you bought a Scream Eevee somewhere between.
Oh,
50...
it's quite a bit more. I'm about to send a bunch to you to consign, Dan.
Perfect.
So this
what is going on?
Yeah, and this is.
I want to preface this a little bit to the chat. Like, they might think we're just super bearish. You're looking at 3 people right now who are super engaged in this hobby and are selling into this hobby. We are not complaining about this market. And I think people will think like it's all doom and gloom. No, we're just trying to wrap our brains around this market. And people need to understand that there's a difference to that. Like, you know.
Yeah. So go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna. I'll try to wrap up. I know I was going along. But so say somebody bought this EV at $100. Hey, I valued it at $100. I bought it. Well, now it's over 1,000. It's like, will you regret it more that you wake up tomorrow and it's now 800 and you missed the top and you could have had more money, or will you regret more selling it today for 1,500, whatever the number is, and then you find out it's $3,000 next week? At the end of the day, it's like, know what your goals are in life, in the hobby, and where can you put that money otherwise? Is it repairs on your car? Is it like a deck on the back of your house? Like, it can be anything. Everyone is different. Everyone has their own goals and lives and all that in finances. But you just got to make the decision and not look, because that FOMO on the sell side, like say you only value that card at $100, the $100 you paid 5 years ago, you went into a deep slumber and you finally just woke up and looked at YouTube and looked at eBay and you see that the card's now this. I'm never going to tell someone you should sell it. But like at the end of the day, if you have somewhere better for the money, if it doubles the week later, that's not on you. That's like all you can do is work with the information you have today.
Yeah. And like, I hope everyone ignores everything I'm saying and just continues to buy from me and from other people. Like, and it continues to go up. And if it triples again, phenomenal. Like for the people who bought it from me, like, this is the second time in the hobby that I have sold parts of my collection. I'll be honest. It's only the second time that I've sold parts of my collection. When I start to sell parts of my collection, it's because I feel that the market is so overvalued in certain areas for me personally that I can't even justify, like, I don't need the money. Like Dan's talking about people who like, this is a play for car payments or could really shift or change her life. Like, I'm not going to say that like, yes, the more money I can make right now, the more then cards I can buy, the more I can invest that money, the more I could potentially like leave to my kids and my family. It's like money still has lots of purpose and meaning in my life, but it's not like I need to sell this in order to like pay a bill and I'm like super like I'm not in that situation. And I really enjoy these cards. Again, never planned on selling any of it. Was hoping a lot of the stuff would just hold its value, and yeah, so I can only suggest to other people sort of what I do or say what I do to other people, and people can do what they want. And then you just like, don't look back. It's amazing. You sold something way higher than you felt it was valued. Phenomenal. Now here's something different though, because I also have I do consults with people and I have these conversations with people. I love this item and I'm afraid that it's going to run away from me and I'm never going to get it back. Right. That's a little bit of a different category of like, you're still probably trying to process, like, even at this price, like, obviously if it goes down, it was the right decision. That's true for any item ever in the history, right? That's a silly sort of thought experiment. A good thought experiment is like, well, what if it continues to go up and sort of runs away from you? Would you feel bad that you no longer have that item in your collection, that, that was a key piece of something important to you? If the answer is that's a key thing that's important and it's a pretty rare item, and you theorize that like there's a decent chance it's going to run away from you, there's a lot of people in this hobby. I remember Scott Pratt, during 2020 and others saying like, telling stories of people who sold or dumped a lot of their stuff in 2018 or 2017, sort of after the 2016-ish boom. who then loved the hobby, but sort of like were never able to get back into it because things then got like too expensive and they weren't able to like afford the cards they used to have. And it was so kind of like depressing that they never stayed in it. Right. So like there is a situation where like you could end up selling something that you could really regret. I try to get to a position where it's like, this is so overvalued compared to what I think it is to me, and where and how I value this item in my life. One, two, I think it's going to go down or not continue to go up, or I think now is a very good time to sell. Three, I can put that money immediately into other things that are going to appreciate. And so even though I think, whether it's cards or stocks or anything else, even if I think this item might continue to appreciate, maybe my other items or other things appreciate faster, and then I can rebuy that item back in the future, you know, etc. You know, that's how I try to navigate this stuff. I'm a collector, right? I'm here fundamentally to collect. That was why I got into this initially. But you know, it's a jigsaw puzzle, and I like, you know, it's my entire Star Wars and my entire Disney speculation has been funded by like, you know, some of my Pokemon speculations in the past. And now some of my Disney and Batman speculation then funded my Rainbow Rare and, you know, and alt art, you know, speculation, which isn't, now I'm using that money to fund something else. Like, that's how I move and try to stay ahead. How much of it's luck, you know, trying to constantly stay in front of it. It may all end. The music may end. You may not be able to just go to the next thing, buy it before it booms, and then you make a bunch of money. Like, that is not the new normal, unless 1% of us can continue to do that while the 99% continues to make us all rich. And, you know, and is that a possibility that they just continue to plow more and more money, and then eventually there's no buyer at the end? Maybe. Again, some things it's more likely that could happen to others. And then there could be the top 1% of the hobby, 1 to 3% of the hobby, that prices are way lower than they're going to be in 30 to 40 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 15 years, like way lower. It could be a sports situation where the guys who made the most money in sports were actually the people who bought the highest end stuff and actually held it for 40 years, not even the people who were flipping and had businesses all these years, which is crazy to think about. You know, so there are people who say only the flippers are smart. You know, it's like, not necessarily, you know, and they're not necessarily going to make the most money. But again, there are times to do that. There are times to make more sense to do that. And obviously, investing is really for people who I think generally are in a good financial situation and have the excess money to invest, you know, longer term. So, yeah.
I'd be curious, what's both your opinions on this? Do you think where we are living at today is a better time, just as a whole, for the market, especially for selling stuff, opposed to late 2020, early 2021? Because I'll tell you right now, I was not positioned in late 2020, 2021 to like really be selling cards in a way that I wanted to. The way I had to do was selling personal collection pieces. I'm positioned now drastically different today than I was end of 2020 when it comes to selling. Do you feel like you guys have just positioned yourself differently now, where, you know, and again, Dan, you talked about it just earlier this live, like a lot of the cards you sold were cards that maybe you did consider part of your personal collection, and then you had to, you know, re-examine everything you have as a collector and say, yeah, maybe this isn't worth it anymore. So then you sold those in. But now you're totally positioned differently. Like, your entire business, you position yourself to be a seller. So do you feel that
Yeah,
2023 is maybe actually better than end of 2020, early 2021?
the biggest thing is I'm full time now. So now it's like, instead of having 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week to play around in it, theoretically I could have 40 to 80 hours a week, depending on what's going on otherwise. And but yeah, as far as just how the market is more broadly, liquidity wise, and just like the availability and the sheer number of plays out there, especially with the state of the grading companies. I mean, you've got certain grading card companies, if cards hit their door on Monday, they're shipping back to you by Wednesday. And then there's the black label thing going on. there are just so many angles that can just seemingly print money, and it doesn't feel like it should be real. It doesn't feel like it's sustainable. It probably all isn't, but that's where I feel like I'm at. What about you, Jake?
What was the question? I just forgot.
Like 2020, 2021 to today, as far as how have you positioned yourself? Like, where do you feel the difference between the markets or whatever?
Position myself. I don't know. I yeah, I'm still holding on to like my WotC stuff that I didn't sell during 2020. Most of the stuff I kept were some of the low pop like Neos and E-series stuff, and gold stars, things like that. I have sold some more of the doubles of those things for sure, and I'm down to like single copies of a lot of that stuff. And again, I was doing that while I was hedging with these like rainbow rares GXs, like that. Like that's how I think very much in terms of like what I think is going to happen, and then I make a really high upside play on something sort of hedging against often. So mathematically, kind of like whatever happens, like I'll probably win quite well. And like part of what's so amazing about these markets is they're like, I could not do that in the stock market. Like these markets are so much easier to see, to like position yourself in things that like have tremendous potential realistic upside. You know, we're not talking about like penny stocks. We're talking about like, we've seen how things stunk the last like 3-4 years, right? Like realistic, almost like if, you know, to some people sort of like guaranteed it's only a matter of time, you know, it's obviously scary. But I mean, one thing I wanted to mention based on this, you know, I think watching Rudy is really fascinating to gauge sort of his commentary and sort of where he's at and the message that he's sending. And he's often, when he's sending like, you know, his constant message tends to be like, now's the time when people make money. He thinks we're in a bearish market. He made a video coming out saying that like we're in a bearish market right now, right? Which is interesting, right? And he is in Magic, to be fair, so he's not really aware of like what's necessarily going on in like a lot of Pokemon, and he's focusing on like the newest modern Pokemon sets. So to be fair, let's focus on those, right? So like all of the negativity, which gives me a big eye roll because like these sets are still booming, but like, you know, on our first sort of Scarlet and Violet, you know, sets here. Oh, the pull rate's too easy. The cards aren't good enough, you know, tanking in value. I'm losing money. I'm buying cards fresh out of the gate and I'm losing money. I'm not tripling. Like, you know, it's the amount, the mindset shift and change. No booster box got over $100 for like 3 years. Okay. During Sun and Moon. The first one to ever get there, to ever break the $100 seal. Now, people were selling them over $100 and like Troll and Toad and these sorts of things. We're talking about like eBay, like the cheapest you could buy it, right? The first one to break it, I think, was like Breakthrough from like X and Y or something like that. This is like any set that was like Evolutions and onward during this period, just for a little bit of history. And you can go back on Rudy's channel and he has videos talking about this. He has videos talking about like, oh my gosh, like Breakthrough, and he shows Breakthrough and he's like, I've lost all this money on Pokemon. I'm never doing Pokemon again. It's a complete disaster. Finally, a box broke $100. Like, oh my gosh, like maybe things are turning around. Like, you know, now it's like if a box doesn't in 3 to 4 to 5 years appreciate to $500 or $400 or $300, it's like a failure. And if a box right away is like $110, $115, $120 or $105, $108. Now, again, yes, the MSRP is more expensive. Yes, inflation, you know, et cetera, into these things. But it's amazing the mindset shift and the change and what's being called a bear market and what's being called a bull market. And the new normal, that does not exist. That's not a real thing. Like supply and demand and numbers and math are behind our physical reality. Okay. So there is no new normal where things go up forever, where every 4 to 5 years, everything appreciates that much. Like that's not a thing. Like the only possible way that could be a thing is I can't imagine a way, because if that sustains itself, you're just going to have more people come in, which is going to make Pokemon print more. Then eventually it's going to be all investors and no collector. Like it just doesn't work in sort of a capitalistic greed competitive landscape that those types of returns can be made without the Pokemon company printing more and trying to make more profit, and or more people coming in and investing and speculating. You know, the reason why those booster boxes never went up, those breakthrough and everything before, people weren't investing. There were no investors and speculators. Now everyone's investing and speculating. So despite people putting so much more in, yeah, anyway, these things have been said before, but yeah, this new normal idea that frankly is being pushed by Rudy and like lots of people, and like it's like now, but that doesn't mean that Pokemon's dead. Again, a year and a half ago to 2 years ago, I was like the most bullish voice for a few months on YouTube, and people were writing comments on my question like, "I quit your channel. You're way too bullish. You're telling people that you're buying battle styles and Chilling Reign." And it was the only time that Rudy and I agreed, you know, on the things on some of those videos. It's people who say that, oh, everyone just says, Jake or anyone or Dan or any of these people just say, oh, it's unsustainable. Oh, yes, markets are always go through periods where it's unsustainable and then they break back down. And then if they sustain themselves, they go back up. That's how markets function. Learn how markets function and ebbs and flows. Learn to try to develop an instinct to sort of where you are in that cycle if possible. You know, yeah, I don't know what you guys have to say in response to that, but
one thing I want to just link back to something PK said earlier and kind of tie it into the whole investing thing. Not only are some amount of consumers investing, and some people think that 99% of product purchases are all being invested and nothing's being opened. Look at the pop reports, like a lot of product is being opened. What percent historically has been investing, buy and hold, sealed versus what is today? I have no idea. But like one thing that's happening, the supply chain, the distribution chain. PK did say earlier that there's nothing available like the past several sets. It's pretty much just Scarlet and Violet and like Paldea Evolved. A caveat to that, some distributors, I'm not going to name any names, but anyone with distribution access to these distributors will know, some distributors are investing in product these days. They do their initial waves, they do their initial allocations, and I am logged in right now on my account to one of the major distributors. I can buy Lost Origin, which isn't surprising because some amount of pallets they must have been sat on as an investment instead of selling it. Why sell it wholesale for $86.50 when they can sell it to me today for $140, and we're getting that reprint in several weeks. They're going to sell to me at like $120, I think. But I can buy Chilling Reign. It's $135, but it's Chilling Reign. I can buy Brilliant Stars right now, also at $135. I can buy Fusion Strike. I can buy Silver Tempest. I can buy Astral Radiance. I don't think this is stuff that just got printed. I don't think this is stuff that Pokemon just trickled out. They are putting back pallets of I don't know how much, and I can't buy unlimited quantities of this. A lot of these are limit 1, limit 2, limit 4. But distribution did not do that years ago. When I got into distribution in 2015, I could buy back to a lot of Black and White era sets. The newest set was Phantom Forces, and I could buy back maybe to like Noble Victories, Next Destiny, certain sets like that. And then even like blister packs of Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Triumphant, and so on. But as of right now, some amount of investing is going on, even in the supply chain, even at the distribution level. So if and when things get bad, right now, price goes up because price goes up. Someday, price could go down because price goes down. And I'm not calling for it. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm taking my allocations at wholesale cost and I'm feeling quite comfortable. But part of that is due to like the foundation I've built as a business, as like my personal finances. But yeah, I just wanted to tie in the two things, what was talked about earlier, and tie into the whole investing thing.
Yeah, no, that is interesting that we could be running into this weird time where people are holding back product. And, you know, there's some products I think about like, you know, real early releases like the Celebrations UPC, stuff like this. You wonder how much of that stuff was being held back, not just from, you know, distribution, but also from people with distribution, meaning they took their entire allocation and they more or less sat on it, you know? I think Rusty was one that talked about, he said he was trying to do a position of 100 Celebrations UPCs because he really liked the product. He thought it was a good long-term investment. I'm pretty sure Squeaks also said something maybe a little similar, maybe not 100, but I think Squeaks was more or less like keeping his whole allocation. Dan, you kept a lot of your allocation, right?
I've been buying more. I have like 200
Buy
right
more.
now.
Yeah. So that's been like a pretty common theme that a lot of people seem to not really have sold much, but bought a lot. So you wonder and obviously 100 celebrations UPCs that Rusty was putting away. That's not a drop in the bucket, but how many people were doing that you will never know their names. You'll never know that they were doing that. And you start to add all that up and you say, well, how much did that influence the market and stuff like that? So
Oh, and I was thinking Charizard UPC. I don't know if I mixed up or
I meant celebrations because
I don't have
celebrations
I
is
don't have
definitely
200 of those.
what?
I don't have 200 of those today. I have 200 of the Charizard ones.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was talking celebrations UPCs though.
Okay, I got mixed up.
One thing I just to repeat, I guess, just so I can try to make it clear to illustrate, like the way capitalism works, the way free markets work is that if something is too good to be true, eventually people will discover it and start to do it, and then it ends. So if we can all every 3 to 4 years make 400, times our money like clockwork, my mom will be investing in Pokemon in 10 to 15 years, probably. Like everyone will be investing in Pokemon. Okay. So it's, and that might sound like a joke or crazy, but it's unless there's some sort of insane competitive advantage. This is why it's so important to talk about competitive advantage. Like I'll talk about our Patreon this month. I'll plug our Patreon. Like I did a presentation on investing and why competitive advantage is so key. Don't look at prices and follow prices. You'll lose. Ask, do you have a competitive advantage in this market? Right? Dan talked earlier. He has a competitive advantage in MetaZoo. Does it, so he's a huge competitive advantage there, right? There are competitive advantages in because you know how to grade. Now, lots of people here still have a lot of competitive advantages in this market. Maybe you know how to grade. You have a big eBay platform where you can sell. Like you're still way ahead probably of a lot of people who are coming into the space. But if you have lost your competitive advantage and you're still making a huge amount of money and anyone could do what you're doing and it takes really no knowledge or skill or ability, that's a danger. That should be like a red flag. That's probably the best, no matter what you're doing and what you're into. If you're making money very easily without much skill, ability, or knowledge, it is going to end very quickly and very badly often. Is probably a good way of putting it.
Like coins in the 1980s when institutional money, I think to some extent tried moving in. You can Google the 1980s coin bubble and you can see some charts that have not recovered to today.
Those charts are still
to be very blunt and honest, the people who are being very smart right now are James from ZNG Emporium, Dan. It's people who are building businesses that are going to give them competitive advantages that are not based on investing, that are based on just people's interest in buying and selling this. And they're building relationships with eBay and relationships with customers and platforms that are going to give themselves great competitive advantage that doesn't depend on the investment, the markets, right? TCK, like those are the people in the spaces, the auction houses, like these are the places and the things that have true competitive advantage. A lot of what else is going on is just kind of like random luck and following trends. And most people are losing, even though it feels like maybe everyone's winning. Like most people are going to lose, in that. Anyway.
No, I think that's a good point. Like the people that do lose, and there's a lot of people that did lose. We talked about those cards earlier today. We talked about the Jungle Pikachus and Eevees. Those were losers, It's hard to say what's going to be the winner, what's going to be the loser, though.
And some amount of people FOMO, like they don't want to sell. They want to be that top data point. They want to be like whenever it all ends, whenever it starts going the other way, they don't want to be nowhere. They fear missing out on more gains. They fear missing out on that last 2x. So some people watched Eevee and Pikachu. I've thought about making this video at some point, but I've just not gotten around to it. But like, how many people actually capitalized on numbers within like 10% of the top? Not many at all.
Because the
in
pop
the
was only,
grand
I think
scheme
the
of
pop was
things.
130, Dan. So you, at a max, you couldn't even have that. That card was only 130 graded. Now there's over 1,000 of them because people started grading them. But at the time, it was a pop 130 or whatever.
But
So
look, and like some amount of people saw that price. And one thing that we don't know, we'll never know. Some amount of people own Green's Exploration. It's like a $4,000 card today. I think I sold a couple on consignment a couple months ago. My consigner owned them. Hey, I no longer value these more than the market. Let me sell them $1,500 a pop, maybe. Now they're over 4,000. Some amount of people don't even know that. Like some amount of people aren't on YouTube every day, aren't on eBay every day. Some amount of people, if someone could tell them, if they knew their cards 5x, 10x, they would sell them. So and some people are just that true of collectors, I guess, right? Some amount of people will just perpetually own them forever because they bought them as a consumer. They consume them. They're off the market forever. What percent are this versus that? Impossible to know, but I guess we'll find out to some extent.
I've said it before on a live. I said, how many binders do you think are sitting in people's basements or parents' basements that have Rayquaza Gold Stars in it, and they have no clue because they opened a handful of packs up as a kid, and then down the line, somebody's going to get lucky and have that be like a garage sale find or something, and then they're going to make a viral video about somebody who picks up a binder with a Rayquaza Gold Star that hits a 9 or a 10, and they just make bank. Like, are you going to tell me that number is 0? Because it's not. And how many of those binders exist today, And then how many kids are opening packs up today? And then in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, those cards are just sitting there. It's hard to say. I mean, how many kids do you think pulled Moonbryons? Probably a lot. There's probably a lot of Moonbryons sitting on a lot of kids' binders in pretty good condition. And if they were to send that away, that's $1,000 card. And I saw Josh the Green Shiz earlier said he saw a Japanese Moonbryon in a black label sell for $13,000 on a PWCC auction tonight. We're living in the days of $13,000 set cards. Set cards. Yeah, it's in a black label, but who cares? Like Dan talks about PFM. Scott made that video, like talking about those guys. I got to meet Scott at the Hartford sign-in event. I'm trying to get PFM on my channel. It's been like pulling teeth with him, but
That'd be a good
hopefully
one.
someday. But
when that Rainbow Rare hit 200, when that Rainbow Rare Charizard from Burning Shadows at $250, it was like, oh my God, Pokemon's on the map. For the first time, modern Pokemon matters. And now look at where we are. Just what, 4 years later?
Well,
Look
it's
at us
funny. I
go.
had TCA Gaming hopped on one of the monthly podcasts at the end, and Scott talks about selling, or Rusty talked about selling one of his PSA 10 Charizards he graded, first edition. He couldn't sell it for $2,000. He ended up selling it for $1,600, and he felt good about the sale because he said at the time Gary King Pokemon was paying $700 for first edition Charizards, and Rusty sold his for $1,600. Like, there's always going to be stories of like that, of cards that keep moving up. But at the end of the day, do you think that ever keeps Rusty up at night? Hell no. Rusty probably never even thinks about that sale because he's just too busy doing other stuff. And sometimes you just got to keep moving with the market, like don't always look at the what ifs or what was, just keep looking at like the future.
People spend way too much time looking in the rearview mirror. I've talked about it before, but in life, you can only worry about things that check two boxes. One, you need to be able to control it. And does it even affect you? Like some people worry about all these cards that have no effect on them. And we probably fall into that sometimes too. Before this stream started, that Battle Day Lily went for $105,000 or 100,500, something like that, a little over 100K. That'll be posted all over Instagram. That'll be like, should this card be worth this? I don't really care at the end of the day. I don't own it. I'll never own it. It doesn't affect me. Overall, it's good for the hobby, right? It's my business. It's good that it's in this business. It means the hobby's strong, but I can't control it and it doesn't affect me. I can't worry about it. And so many people just stress so much. Like those 100 Scream Eevees that I sold them between 40 and 400, 500 a piece. Now they're almost $2,000. Did I lose? I mean, what would that be? Over $100,000? Did I lose over $100,000? No, I made tens of thousands of dollars. I did very good business, buying them at $6 to $16 a pop, grading them and flipping them for a big margin. And some amount of people will just drive themselves crazy, and they'll never like get anywhere because they'll always be stuck like FOMO both sides. And a lot of people just it's built into your brain. It's human psychology. Buy high, sell low. That's just some people are in the stock market, in crypto, there are so many studies out there in a stock market period where the S&P returns 10%, the average retail active investor earns like 2% or something because they're just in, out, in, out, in, out.
So Pokemon Classics Matt just had a great comment. He said, live in the present, plan for the future, but look to the past for wisdom. Pokemon Classics. I like that.
So I want responding to like Dan's point of like, why I care about this stuff. For me, I couldn't, excuse my swearing, I couldn't give two shits about any of these cards. That's not what I care about. It's the working class people who are getting fucking destroyed by these auction houses, by these YouTubers, by these content creators, by these fellow community members and hobbyists who don't give two shits about anyone else and are such fucking huge egos and they care so much about pumping their own cards. So anyway, that's where my anger and where my care comes from. I'm fine. And I'm selling into this and making more money now than I've made in a while. Right. And it's stupid. It doesn't feel good because it's not from my talent or ability that I'm making money. I'm making money off of nonsense and off of irrationality and off of anyway. So that's where the passion comes from. I think if you care about like what people who can afford are paying for really high-end cards, I definitely don't get that. I don't give two shits like what Stevie Aoki buys with his money. Like he should have fun and enjoy his money and pay whatever he wants and do all these types of things. I always found it hilarious how much people gave a shit about stuff like that. What I give a shit about is like the people in our fucking Discord who probably think, I think Dan and I really try to like say how little we know and how much we're guessing and speculating constantly and what we know and what we don't know, so we don't mislead them at all. But there's a lot of people trying to get rich, trying to make very important money in their lives. I see these people all the time. Okay. And they're way more of those people than they really admit. They're not, there's a lot of collectors who are really investors, who are really who are really at the end of the day and like have huge parts of their net worth in this. And it makes me sick to my stomach. So that's where like the passion comes from. At the same time, like I totally get why other people are just like, why do you care so much about that? Like, sort of to each your own, not because they're heartless and they don't care about other people, but it's sort of like, we're all adults. Just let people make those decisions. You do you, they do that, So there's a certain group of people who are angry about anyone who talks negatively because they're just trying to pump the market constantly. There's a certain group of just constant pumpers, right? And often the biggest content creators are constantly pumping too because their livelihoods are tied up in Pokemon succeeding. They're not going to come on here and like tell you probably the truth. Not because they're bad guys, whatever. It's just like not their job. It's not their obligation. And frankly, their jobs and their success and all things and are tied into like the success of all of this and continue to go up, but whatever. So that's what makes me sick. And that's why I stopped making content for a bit is because I'm just tired of like having these conversations and trying to help people and telling people this and it just falling on deaf ears and people, it's just, it's almost like this time around, I'm just going to make my money and be quiet.
Well, I hope you still want to come on and talk on my channel. I hope we're not.
Yeah. It's an excuse to come on after a month and a half of talking.
Okay.
Like I'm definitely not planning on like disappear, I'm as engaged and into this hobby as I've ever been. And I will still make videos from time to time, but it's just like, that's where like my passion comes from, Dan. Like that's where the heat and the emotion comes from. I just hate seeing people being taken advantage of or risking things that they shouldn't. And like, I know I can't control other people and Dan and I talk about this, sort of live and let live and because we both, Dan and I, share the same message all the time. We have the same opinions on all of this, but you can see there's a different style to how it's shared.
And it doesn't justify it, and it's not really a good way to go about it. But at the end of the day, there's way worse things happening than people selling cardboard for maybe more than it should or more than some people can afford it. You can't like save the whole world. You can't save everybody. Some amount of people are just born to lose all their money through some get rich quick scheme that just inevitably keeps them there are people that lost their life savings in Beanie Babies that 20 years later, and I'm not calling Pokemon Beanie Babies, but they did it in 2020 on WotC cards and this and that. What's up? Oh, you're pointing at Beanie Baby? Nice. I see it.
Yeah, sweet Garcia bear right there.
I still have a bunch of them too from
Gonna retire on that baby.
Thankfully, my college fund, none of that went into Beanie Babies, but my mom did have a lot, and we used to get a lot of the Happy Meals and stuff too.
But no, you're right. But so what are you guys buying in this, or are you buying anything for just personal collection items right now? Forget all the invest in all that talk. Are you buying anything just as a collector, whether it's Pokemon or what? And I'm still working on my same goal.
Jake's pumping some penny stocks.
Get the penny stocks going. Three little pigs.
How are you able to source multiples of these? Are these one buy or just multiple buys?
So most of these characters are, Pluto. Multiple buys. Stuff in Pokemon I'm buying. I'm mostly doing trades for and I've been buying a little bit of DBZ Score, actually, a little bit to fill in some holes. I bought a MetaZoo card, Dan. I showed Dan.
Oh yeah,
to fill in a hole in my collection. Yeah, bought some Star Wars. I bought these. I like these. I think these cards are cool. So these are these etched foil cards.
Are they serialized or are they just
No, not these. I just like these.
What year are those?
Super cheap. 1993.
Oh, that's a Star Wars Galaxy ones then?
Over there, which I haven't showed, I have a complete set of the Stellar 2017 Star Wars cards, which is a fairly new purchase. So it's autographs. Those are all serialized. Those are more on the pricey side. Some of my new stuff. What about you, PK? What have you been doing?
I've been not doing much. Things that I would consider collection items, not really. I was gonna buy a card on Z&G's auction block tonight, but Cam never got back to me. Thanks a lot, Cam. I watched it sell for $513. It was CGC 8.5 base set Raichu, first edition. But I messaged Cam. I said, "Is this a 8 or a 9?" And Cam responded back, "It's an 8.5." And I was like, "Cam, I knew that's how you were gonna respond." I was like, "Come on." But I thought about just keeping it for the meme because obviously PSA barely hands out 8.5s. I looked at the pop of that card and it's 2,000 pop, and 8.5, there's 13 of them out of 2,000. So, but I thought about buying it as maybe a cross grade play to a 9, but I couldn't really tell from the photos. Other than, just picking up random Raichus here and there. I'm still trying to complete my Skyridge complete master set. So non-hollows, reverse hollows. That Charizard still eluded me. I know we talked about it a little bit, Jake, in Denver. I know you have the Crystal Charizard hollow in a PSA 10. Do you still have that, or did you sell that or trade it?
Do I still have it? No, I still have it.
You still have the Charizard, yeah. So I know
not for long, maybe.
I was looking at your Charizard, and dude, I'm not even liquid enough to buy that Charizard right now. So
yeah, it's rebounded a decent amount. I think they're 14, 15 now.
Yeah, I offered you 9, and you were pretty strong on 12.
I laughed.
Which you were strong on 12, which at the time actually was a really strong deal because recent sales were 14, 15. So you were giving me the friend discount, but
I had been offered 11, and then you were like, "How about 9?" And I was like,
Well, I
"I
was
do
gonna do.
love
I was
you,
like, we could
but
do 9 cash at that day, but
ooh, the cash,
I was like, we'll do it today. 9 grand
cash
today,
in
Jake.
hand."
I will get you cash, and you're like, no. But other than that Charizard, which I don't know. Maybe I'll just never complete it. I might just bite the bullet and pay like the 4 grand for the 9 and just never get the 10. And then same with the reverse hollow. I don't have the reverse hollow Crystal Charizard in a 10 either, so I might bite the bullet and pay like between 12 and 15 for the reverse hollow and a 9. But those are the two big ones right now that are just 15 grand's a lot of money to spend on a card, man, and just stick it on a shelf behind you that nobody could
Mhm.
see. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I'm
I mean,
at with my personal collection.
for me, like that card is a card that makes sense for a collector like myself to potentially own if I had tens and tens of millions of dollars.
Well,
Like it's now there's some cards that people are paying 10, 20, 30, $40,000 that if I had $100 million, I would not even consider buying. Do you know what I mean? So like there are levels to it. But again, that doesn't mean that there are other people who really like that card and genuinely would want it. So again, um
so
but
this
yeah,
was a personal collection by Jake. I bought like
little
I
super Dragon Vault.
yeah, this is a collection buy. This isn't a I bought this on PWCC for like $12. It costs $15 to grade a card. This is just checking a box. So
Are you are you like set completing with that? Or are you specifically collect
I
odds?
don't I'm doing a couple things like in the background, like trying to complete like random sets. I don't want to get too into it, but like this is a card that checks a weird box. I mean, Dragon Vault's a small set, right? Only 20 cards, so it's not hard to complete little sets like Dragon Vault, collect 20 cards. So like this one's 20 out of 20 and it's PSA 9. It's not a 10 and not going crazy on cards like that. But yeah, that's a personal collection item.
All upside, man. All upside. No.
Yeah. And that's a 30-cent card encased in plastic. So, what about you, Dan? Are you considering anything as a collection besides like what you've talked about? Like, and I know you also mentioned that you picked up the Moonbryon and you kind of like tuck that baby away, which is funny because I would do the same thing.
I sold one though. I had a spare. I actually got
Okay.
at that event in Hooksett, New Hampshire. I only did one deal, and it was a trade. Kind of crazy to even say it out loud, but I traded a PSA 9 Shining Charizard Unlimited from Neo Destiny with a few, like my side was that, and then their side was a Moonbryon and a few other cards about equal value. I figured I was going up in liquidity. I put that 3% promo on my $1,200 Moonbryon and it moved in 2 days. So yeah, I do still have my other copy. It might be one of those for the memes, for the laughs, for the like reminding me the market that I'm doing business in, just to keep me grounded. Like I keep the Evolutions box, not because I think it's going to go up a good amount over time, not as an investment. It's more like a remnant of the past, just to remind me what went on then. And it's to remind me when things start going on in other areas of the market. It's like, don't forget Evolutions. Don't forget some of these other things that went on. And I did flash it on screen quickly for a second, but I definitely want to be a master Quaxley merch collector. Anything and everything that comes up on Pokemon Center US or Japan, I want to buy. And yes, that is both my children. I don't really like posting them on social media. I mean, a lot of people do. I just, I don't know. I don't really use like Facebook or anything. And my wife does post them there, but that's their Instagram reveal. And they're donning their nice Quaxley masks.
they they look like they're like prisoners with masks on, like against a blank
It's
wall.
to me, they look like, because my son is really into Legos. They especially the one on my daughter. It's like the exact proportions of like a Lego head. I just see like a Lego minifigure head Quaxley, which is funny. They loved it though. They put those things on, ducks running around the house, bouncing into everything. There's no eye holes. Like I don't know what those things are supposed to be. Hat, mask, I don't know, but I love it. So
People are
I
saying
love
that's an album
Pokemon.
cover.
Yeah. I love Pokemon still. It's just the market values when they're in that certain shape and size and made out of those materials of cardstock and shiny foil, most are valued by the market more than me. I love these canvases. I love a lot of these things behind me. It's just, I have a hard time tying up business capital in very many cards at this point in my life. And maybe life will treat me well. Maybe Pokemon will treat me well 10, 15, 20 years from now. Maybe the kids are out of the house and I'm at a point in my life where I have excess, and maybe I get back into it. Maybe I dive back down rabbit holes and go full collector boy again and with more capital. But I'm just not at that point in my life.
Yeah. No, I think it's important not to ever lose sight of why were you drawn to this hobby in the first place? And for probably most, if not all of us, what we were drawn to in the first place was just that collecting, that nostalgia, the checking a box, the completing a set, and it feels good to complete stuff. And I think it's very important that no one loses sight of that, you know?
I think it's just
Sometimes,
at what cost, you know,
yeah,
like that's sort of what it becomes. Cause like, I would say that I love cards as much as I ever have. I don't think it's at all, you know, the reasons I'm considering selling some of my collection is simply like, it's just not worth it that much to me. Whereas like the earlier price, it was easily worth it. And then early on, it was like worth it for me to buy 10 copies of everything, right? Because that's how I valued it personally. So, you know, we'll see.
Mason Berry said the newest sets 15 to 20 years from now will be the best sets Pokemon ever made.
Best set of all time.
I love that that is a meme though. And it's a true meme though. Every set is always the best set.
It's because there's interest. Like, there's interest by all the biggest capital extractors in the hobby do best when the newest set is hype, right?
Mhm.
Like they don't want to pump mid-era stuff. Like Pokemon wants the newest set to be the best set of all time. Go buy it. You gotta have it. It's the best one we've ever made. All the grading companies want them flooded, and they're the most readily available cards that people are going to be constantly opening. And so it's like advertising, and there's a lot of, again, feeding into the whole human psychology. You got to have it, the latest, greatest, hottest fad. It's always going to be the newest set because that's where most people financially benefit. And I meme a lot more lately in Discord. I'm heavily on the best set of all time, the best art of all time. I am heavily dug into those memes because and again, a lot of times, like it's as far as artwork goes, a lot of the most beautiful cards of all time, at least subjectively for me, have been disproportionately created like more recently. When you tie in which ones I like the most, tying in nostalgia and all that, a lot of them still exist in the past, but they're using more of the card. Like they're just doing new things. Back to the old, they'll continue to do that, right? They'll continue to do that. 25 years from now, instead of having 1,000 Pokemon Pokédex, presumably we will have 2,000 Pokemon in the Pokédex. We will have 220 sets. We will have 100 billion cards printed, maybe more. I mean, that's if they match the first 27 years pace, 25 years pace. If they match the current trend of today, I think there's 50 billion cards today, roughly. Another 25 billion years, there will be another 25 years, there will be 250 billion more. So there will be 300 billion total. Crazy to think about.
Yeah. I think for me, like I jump around, like as far as like what I like, it jumps around a lot. Like I'm really into the Japanese like black and white era stuff right now, like the full arts. I've been into that for a while. Has been holding my attention, and I've been like following certain ones I'm looking for, you know, and will buy them eventually at like good auctions, I'm hoping. Again, though, you know, those might jump again in price with what's going on. It's interesting to see what things in Japanese have really jumped and what things haven't, etc. But yeah, you know, I do think rarity and difficulty to find is part of the enjoyment for me. For me, it's like I like the $1 like modern stuff, and then I like the hard to find like middle era and vintage stuff. I don't see much value in like the more expensive modern stuff, just for me personally as a collector. Because to me, like the art isn't better than a lot of the other modern art, and there's so many cool looking modern cards that I like, you know, I can fill binders worth with like $1, $2 cards. So
When you say mid-air, are you talking like late Nintendo stuff, so Gold Star sets? Are you talking like Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or do you consider like black and white mid-air? Because you were just saying how you're going after some black and white Japanese cards.
yeah, I mean, I really like black and white. I really like X and Y. I mean, I even like the sun and moon full art cards that a lot of people don't like the ones with just the plain color background. Like, I definitely am mostly drawn right now to to those X and Y ones. And it's also fun just like collecting the first full art of like this Pokemon that I like. Like I enjoy that sort of thing, like the history of that, the connection to that. Um, the like the sun and moon stuff, I think holds a place because it was pretty early on when I was in the hobby. So I just like remember opening that stuff probably to some degree. I'm not sure I'd like it as much. If not for that, I don't really know. But I like those. I always thought that those were like underrated, compared to like how other people felt about them as a collector. Yeah. I like the rainbow rares quite a bit.
Yeah. Cam was saying Thunderous and Tornadus from Emergent Powers. He said mark his words, that's the next one's to stock. Let's hope, Cam, fingers crossed, because that would be nice. But yeah, Dan. So obviously you are doing all like your MetaZoo plays and stuff like this. Are you thinking about dabbling into anything else, or are you just happy with where you are with just sticking with Pokemon and MetaZoo?
I can't keep up with the amount of stuff that I want to do in Pokemon right now. So it feels like I have enough. I did buy in the fall that massive collection that had Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and Yu-Gi-Oh and this and that. And if the price is right, I'll buy a decent variety of things. But at the end of the day, like interacting with those cards, and I had some very like historic cards and some very high-end cards for the different IPs that I was interacting with, and they just didn't do it for me. Like they didn't have that same thing. They didn't have the same. But if and when I feel like there's nothing to do with my capital in Pokemon or in MetaZoo, I guess I'll look elsewhere to make plays, right? But as of right now, yeah, I just can't possibly do everything I want to be doing.
You bought a couple booster boxes of One Piece, right? And you said they pretty much, as fast as they came in, they went out for you.
That was silly. It was like I've actually been called recently by one of my distributors for pre-orders of the upcoming sets, and at some point I'll probably get burned. Like I'll probably, because I'm completely paper handsing those things, not to the extent that I'm auctioning them. I'm still buy it nowing them, but yeah, I think I had 2 cases of Paramount War. I think it was. I bought them for, I don't remember what the prices were, but I bought cases for like less than $700 a pop. I want to say 12-box cases, and then I just insta sold them a week or two later for like 2,000 a piece. And that's because I heard a bunch of people talking about it, and I had access, non brick and mortar exclusive, and I up my order for the next sets. I'll move them into the market, and maybe I'll get burned, but it's like I'll probably just be making a bet with less money that I made on the first one. So it's like, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, man. I always think like, what's the next thing I want to move into, or if I want to like dabble in things, but I talked about it before, man. Time is such a bitch. I have no time for anything. And even tonight, we're gonna have to run this live a little short. And I told Dan before we went live, just with the wife and the baby and stuff. He sleeps from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., but then he's up, and I could hear him crying upstairs. But man, it's the time aspect, and the thought of trying to learn something new is just so daunting to me. And I like Jake, I give you all the credit, man. The fact that you're able to learn about all these different TCGs and some of the TCGs that you have to learn about, like some of that real old Disney stuff. You've talked about it before, like going to shows and talking to people that have been doing this for 30 plus years and going after those cards, and they don't even know like what sort of packs they came from, some of the people. And you're trying to like figure out that sort of information. Like how daunting some of that, like just because it's not like Pokemon. Pokemon's easy. You can just go on Bulbapedia and you can find the answer for almost anything. And whatever Bulbapedia is lacking, you can go on E4 and look at some old thread or something. And somebody at some point did the homework for you. But to do what you're doing, Jake, how do you find the time for all this?
Yeah, I think that, so I am like an investor and I love investing. And so for me, my competitive advantage is I try to come in with a lot of money and I try to come in with more knowledge. Um, and rather than building a business that is like, my competitive advantage is like building those relationships where I can get distribution or product cheaper. I can get a relationship with eBay where I can eventually can sign and sell less, like a lot of the guys are doing very successfully. Like my competitive advantage is like knowing these things, being ahead of the curve, trying to predict kind of like what are going to be the next popular things, getting those things at an undervalue. So as far as finding the time, yeah, I don't know. I basically do my main job, cards, basketball, basically like every second of the day. So yeah, I'm pretty just like pretty busy with all of that. And yeah, it's but it's enjoyable. And I still like it as much as I sort of, always have really. We'll see how long it lasts. I also think there's only, I feel like there's only maybe I feel competitive with it and that there's only a short period at times to sort of bring in like my competitive advantage in certain areas. So I think too, there's a sense of urgency, probably like what a lot of businesses are feeling as far as partnering with eBay and getting in good with them or building up their streaming platforms or being the big YouTuber and trying to make the most of it while it's happening. Like, I think there's a sentiment of sort of whatever lane you're in, you kind of got to make the most of those things right now. And I think that's what I bring or what I focus on.
And Dan, I got a quick question for you because you talked about, I mean, you sent me an Instagram message today. You were kind of joking, but you're like, oh, someday you just got to go full-time Pokemon. And I'm so far from that. I said never for me. But when I do think of if I did go full-time Pokemon or in a hypothetical world, the hardest thing for me would be to be able to sit down and not have like the rest of my life interfere with it, because what, because you're in a way like not at work. Like, okay, you watch the kids today, you do this while I go do this. And how are you able to separate, like, because when you go to your job, your real job, you get in your car, you drive there, you're there for 8 or 9 hours. Like, your wife doesn't call you up and say, hey, take out the trash or something, like, how are you able to separate this and truly make it a job and not let it just interfere with, what, I'm my own boss. I'm only gonna work 4 hours today. I'm only gonna work 2 hours today. Screw it. I listed 20 cards yesterday. I'm not listing any cards today, something like that.
It's all a balance, and to get very philosophical, I've been talking, I feel like I've been talking more philosophical lately on my channel and in Discord from time to time, but know what your goals are in life. I feel like so many people just meander aimlessly, and they, whether or not they enjoy their jobs or they enjoy what they're doing, it's like they just don't know where they're going. They go in and they clock into work for 40 hours a week, and they just default to their certain distractions, and they just like distract and pass their way through life. But a couple weeks from now, I'm going to be taking off like midweek. I'm going to Legoland with my family. We went last weekend. I'm looking forward. We're members to a couple like zoos around me. I am all about letting family time interrupt business. I am making excess over what I need to, vast excess over what I need to. Part of me is like, I don't know how long this will be around. As Jake was saying, I want to capitalize on it. I want to do it. But another part of me is like, I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and that time is dwindling by the day, right? Like 15 years from now, well, 20 years from now, they're going to be out of the house and gone. And maybe then I'll have a resurgence in whether it'll be collecting or getting deeper into flipping or whatever it may be. But yeah, like I feel like I have very clear goals on what I need, how much is enough, all these concepts I've talked about. And I'm fine taking my foot off the gas. I want to grab as much as I can, and I want to get that market share, and I want to get my foundation built bigger and bigger. But I also want to enjoy life, and I want to, not that I almost died earlier this week, but I did end up in the hospital and I had a procedure, and I didn't like see the light, and I'm having this kind of epiphany. But it does make you think to an extent. Like any day, it can just all be over for any one of us individuals. So you got to enjoy the journey. You got to be having fun while you're going. And yeah, I was thinking about something. I guess I can go into it really quickly, but one thing I've been thinking about more is like a lot of people point to, oh, well, these people are aging into the higher earning years of their career and this and that. And maybe it's just because I'm biased with like my own brain and where I'm at in the hobby and how I think, which obviously I am. Everyone is very self-centric about, like, they try to apply the way they think and see things to the entire market. But as people age into those years where they build families and have kids and this and that, for me personally, this is collecting, at least heavily, is falling to the wayside. And I just, how many people will have that phenomenon happen to them, and will that have any effect? And I feel like I'll be peak collector boy Dan when I'm like 50, because then I'll be empty nested, and then grandkids come around potentially for some people and this and that. Like, I don't really know. But as of today, it's like I'm earning more than I would have ever expected at this stage. And I'm very, very happy with how everything is going. And I'm just fine not getting every cent, because my goal in life is not to maximize numbers in my bank account. It's to maximize my effect on those around me, and just maximizing the amount of experiences and things I can have with them. Very, very deep there. Sorry.
Well, I think that, people are on a journey of sorts, and part of it does have to do with like childhood but there's developing a sense of self is really important to be what Dan is talking about, which is to like be intentional. So Dan's talking about like intentionality. Like he makes decisions with a sort of like intentionality that is driven by like who he is as a person and sort of what he values and what he's aware of, rather than sort of the noise of the world and what other people think or where he should be or these other voices that might be there. And certainly we live in a very connected world. So we're hearing people's opinions and ideas constantly, which is potentially knocking us off ourselves or confusing ourselves or adding into all of this. And so like the version of self that exists now is a very connected version with the internet today. But yeah, I mean, it's great advice, obviously, to try to develop that, and then figure out for yourself, how you want to be intentional, what that looks like. It doesn't need to be the way that Dan's intentional or making the decisions that he makes. It's about, you might hear what Dan has to say and be like, well, I'm not doing that. That means I'm not where I'm at in my life. Or you might hear what I have to say or what PK or anyone has to say. And I think it's more trying to figure out, where you are in your life and how you want to be intentional, about your period. I know in my life, I've had drastically different interests and at times and like focuses, like in my 20s versus my 30s versus like my teens, so I think that there's lots of different, stages and changes. There's no one, right action in that intentionality, I think. But I agree that it's like very valuable.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and that's great advice from both of you guys. And I think I need to take some of that advice right now, because I do have like a 5-day-old upstairs right now, and a wife that just gave birth 5 days ago. So I gotta be at least a little shred of a decent husband. But seriously though, both of you guys are two of the people that I hold at a very high standard in this hobby. I respect both you guys immensely. And I'm super privileged and super honored to call both you guys my friends. And I think it's guys like you that help elevate this hobby and put it in a better place. Because if it wasn't guys like you, given the rational thoughts once in a while, I feel like this hobby could definitely sometimes veer in the wrong directions and maybe drive off a cliff at points. But no, guys, I appreciate you. Thank you for hopping on the channel. And for everybody at home that tuned in for this live, thank you guys so much. You guys truly make this hobby what it is, and it's because of you guys at home watching these videos that we even want to make content or come on and talk Pokemon and stuff like this. So yeah, if it wasn't for you guys, we probably wouldn't be doing this, and if we were, it'd be in a small private group or something like this. But yeah, guys, with that said, again, we appreciate every single one of you, and we'll catch you on the next video.
Thanks, chat. Thanks, PK.
Take care. Thanks, VK.